Alright, so we're back, and this time we're testing Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League with the RX 7800 XT. It's exactly the same system as the 4070 of yesterday or earlier this morning, depending on where you live. It's a 12700K CPU paired with DDR4 4000 megatransfers per second CL18 memory that's running in Gear 1. All the specs are on the screen right now, and you actually have to use the take preview drivers for this game to work. Tired of being bombarded by Windows activation screens, frustrated about not being able to personalize your own PC, flabbergasted that you can't even change many of your sound settings, head on over to scdkey.com using the link in the description below and get 25% off on Windows 10 Pro keys. Remember to use code MPR2024, click apply, click on submit order, select your payment method, and your Windows 10 key will be emailed to you within a few minutes. If you are doing a fresh install of Windows, click on I don't have a product key. Select the version of Windows you want to install and continue with the rest of the installation. If you are activating an existing copy of Windows, the steps from here on out are the same for you. Once the installation has completed, click on Start and start typing Activation. Click on Activation Settings, then click on Change Product Key. Copy your key received from scdkey.com, click Next, then click Activate. And would you believe it, just like that, you are now able to personalize to your heart's content, and you can even now upgrade to Windows 11 if you so desire. To activate your Windows today, click on the link in the description below, and don't forget to use code MPR2024 for a massive discount. Right, so let's go over the settings here quickly. We'll be testing at 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. Once again, you have to do a lot of things to get past the 60 frames per second cap, or capping to your monitor's refresh rate. You have to disable VSync in Radeon control panel or Adrenaline software, that's what it's called, and then you have to enable VSync in-game, right? It's so stupid. Anyway, so okay, I was testing different anti-aliasing options. FXAA looks horrible, but we can't use FSR the same as what we did with DLAA yesterday, so we probably have to just use TAA for the native resolutions, right? I think it should be fine with the native resolution, and then we'll be testing on the high presets at 1080p, and then we'll move on to 1440p, etc. Because we were very CPU bound earlier with the 4070, right? And we don't have any ray tracing enabled. Just going through the settings here. These are just the preset settings, and it's scrolling very slowly. Anyway, you can disable all of these. I personally do. All right, so 1080p, TAA. And on the high preset, exactly the same spot as yesterday. TAA definitely, I'm going to say it looks better than FXAA, but it doesn't look good. So let's start our frame rate counter here. And you can see right off the bat, we're CPU bound. Our GPU usage is sitting at 70%, and we are getting 110 frames per second. Oops, wrong buttons. Exactly the same as with the RX 4070 yesterday, getting around 100 frames per second average. So I know there's a lot of talk that there's a lot of benefits using a Radeon GPU when you are CPU bound, as Radeon drivers have slightly less overhead. But over here, you can see the performance is pretty much identical to the 4070 with the exact same system, getting 110 frames per second average here. And I mean, being CPU bound at 1080p with the RX 7800 XT is not that surprising, but I did expect the 12700K to be slightly better in this game. This game is extremely CPU bound for some reason. I've seen people with the 14900K CPUs complain about being single thread limited. So definitely some optimizations still required here. But you can see our average was 112 frames per second. Our 1% lows are sitting at 67, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 49. Just to emphasize that we are CPU bound, I'm just going to enable FSR. We'll just use quality, and you'll see that the frame rate does not change at all. So we'll just select FSR here. It's on quality. Let's go ahead and save that. And whoops, too many button presses. And you can see we are getting, I mean, let's reset the numbers, getting 110 frames per second. So fully CPU bound, nothing you can do about that unless you overclock your CPU, get faster RAM, whatever. We'll be doing the ray traced settings after the initial RASA performance, because you have to restart the game for the ray tracing to take effect, and this game takes extremely long to load up at times. So off to 1440p we go. Right, so at 1440p, exactly the same settings as I said. VSync needs to be on. It doesn't really matter what you select here. We got TAA very high and no dynamic resolution scaling. On the high preset, no ray tracing, whatever. So let's... Oh, come on. This is exactly what's been happening all the time. Right, so after a few attempts, I'm back in, and so I just dropped this down to medium because I forgot to test the medium like we did with the RX 4070. So 1440p medium TAA, no resolution scaling, and let's see how this goes. Once again, 100 frames per second, and we are CPU bound. So spoiler alert, this is what the performance is going to be like. We have basically hit our max theoretical performance here with the system. There are areas that are not CPU bound. Like if you actually start the game, the frame rate is a lot higher than down here, and if you're up in the sky, like the frame rate is also much higher. So it depends really where you are, but majority of the time we're going to be CPU bound, it seems. And that's kind of annoying because it's a 2024 release. Like, it should not be CPU bound at 1440p with the 7800 XT and 12700K in 2024. Like, if that makes sense, a AAA game. Like, the game visually looks pretty good, so you'd expect most of the load to be on the GPU, but it's not. So like, there's no point in us testing FSR here either. So our average here was 98 frames per second, pretty much slightly lower than at 1080p, but more of the same. Our 1% lows are sitting at 60, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 39. I'm just going to bump this up to the high preset, and let's see what happens. Right, so on the high preset, TAA is set to very high, and nothing else has changed here. Let's see, I'm guessing 100 frames per second here. Well, okay, so now we are finally GPU bound. We're not going to be GPU bound the whole... There we go. I don't know. This is so silly. Like, this game has so many technical issues, and it's like, just look at the frame time graph there. It is extremely inconsistent. And that is like it. I can actually feel it when I tested it earlier before I started recording. That's what I usually do. I test all the settings, then I just see if there's other people out there that have done similar videos to see if the performance is matching more or less. And the frame time graph is extremely inconsistent with this GPU. Like, we're dipping below 60 frames per second here, but because of a CPU bottleneck. And I really do think it's unacceptable. Like, imagine the guys with the 12400F CPUs, whatever. Like, that's going to be a major CPU bottleneck if we are so CPU bottlenecked with the 12700K. All right, but either way, our average here was sitting at 86. Our 1% lows are sitting at 51, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 34. There it is. All right, I'm just going to enable FSR here. Let's see if we can get back to that 100 frames per second, although I don't think... I'm not sure if we are fully CPU bound because we're not getting 100 frames per second. So let's see if FSR can actually help us get back to 100 frames per second here. All right, so exactly the same settings, just with FSR set to quality. And let's go ahead and save that. And there we go. Like, I don't know. We are CPU bound, but we're not getting 100 frames per second like previously. We're now getting 80 frames per second. So some settings might add additional load on the CPU. Like, there are some settings that'll do that, like shadows, etc., because it needs to be calculated. But like, I was expecting 100 frames per second here, to be honest. The same as what we had at 1080p on the high preset, or even the 4070. Currently, I think that 4070 is doing slightly better in this game. Not by much, but like specifically over here, not being able to... dropping into the 50s there again. So definitely needing some patches this game. I'm going to try and make this short from here on out. Let's move on to 4K. Right, so 4K TAA, and let's start off with the medium preset again. Sorry, let's start off with the low preset, same as what we did with the 4070. Let's just keep them all uniform, and let's... like 80 frames per second. I don't know. This is so silly. At least we're GPU bound now. Well, I said that earlier, but and then it actually became CPU bound. It probably will in some areas, although crossing that street generally caused it to become CPU bound. GPUs, it's dipping into the high 90s there, nothing to be too concerned about. So it seems like if you want to be fully GPU bound, the 4K is the way to go. Like, I mean, as I said, there will definitely be some areas where we are CPU bound still. I'm not going to engage in fighting, just trying to get this over with, because I am actually quite a bit frustrated with this game on a technical level. You can think what you want about the game, whether you enjoy it or not, but from a technical perspective, the game has got a lot of issues. All right, so our average there is 84 frames per second. Our 1% lows are sitting at 56, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 40, which is actually the most consistent performance we've seen from this system so far with this GPU. Kind of weird. Anyway, so let's actually see if we can get 100 frames per second now by enabling FSR. Just going to use FSR Quality here again. Luckily, the settings do apply quite quickly. It's just that if you enable ray tracing, it has to restart the game, which is kind of annoying. FSR in this game at 4K looks okay. Anything below that, I tested it earlier on 1440p, and it looks terrible. Like now we are CPU bound again, but at least we're getting almost 100 frames per second, but the frame time graph at times is very, very inconsistent. As I said, just going to do a very short benchmark run here quickly, fire a few shots. But okay, so over here, as I said yesterday, this will be the new ocean view for Modern Warfare benchmarkers, getting 150 frames per second. That obviously boosted our average frame rate up, but I mean, whatever, it's neither here nor there. So our average here is 105 frames per second. Our 1% lows are sitting at 67, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 46. For those of you wondering why I keep on reading out the numbers, some people on watching on mobile ask me to do it as they can't always see all the numbers. So let's move this back to TAA and try the medium preset, and getting just over 70 frames per second. We will probably drop below 60 at times. Maybe not. It's doing quite well, but you can see now that the frame time graph becomes a little bit more erratic. That's not a problem, this, like it's just a little bit more erratic than previously, but also the frame rate is slightly lower, so the spikes are more pronounced, like not in the way it feels, but the way it is presented. Now the game does feel pretty good still. There's no stuttering whatsoever, no input lag. I can't really feel much. Previously with the Nvidia GPU, every time we crossed this street, there was quite a lot of stuttering happening, and I attributed that to maybe a traversal stutter, but we don't see it here on this system. Well, at these settings, we did see it at 1080p, so it might be just a CPU limitation there. All right, so let's enable FSR, and then we'll move on to the high preset. All right, so FSR Quality still on the medium preset here. Let's go back into the game, reset our numbers, and getting 90 frames per second now with CPU bound. So for those of you wondering, like, why don't I test with more aggressive upscaling settings? I did show that in the Nvidia GPU benchmark yesterday, like getting more or using more aggressive upscaling settings definitely don't help when you are GPU bound. I've shown it once or twice in this video as well. So going down to FSR Performance is not going to improve our performance at all. You are limited by the CPU. So unless you can take load off the CPU, this is what your frame rate is going to be like. Right, so I mean, this is actually a pretty good experience. I really wouldn't mind playing like this. FSR set to quality on the 4K medium preset. It looks extremely good. This is on a 27-inch 4K panel that I'm viewing this on, and it really looks good. Like, no complaints whatsoever. Just a lot of other technical issues. All right, so let's move on to the high preset. All right, so the high preset TAA, same as previously. Let's see. Wrong buttons. There we go. Now this GPU is pulling ahead of the 4070 by quite a bit. The 4070 was not able to even hit 60 frames per second here with these settings. It actually hit 60 frames per second on 4K medium. This is maintaining 60 frames per second at 4K high. But we did use DLAA, and DLAA is slightly more demanding than normal TAA, even though it is native resolution, both, like, hopefully. It is slightly more demanding, but you can't use DLAA with the Radeon GPU. So I just tested the DLAA and DLSS with the NVIDIA GPU because it's technologies that you can definitely use, and DLAA definitely looks better than TAA in my opinion. All right, so we actually had a very decent average here of 66 frames per second. Our 1% laser sitting at 46 and 0.1% laser sitting at 34. Frame rate or frame time is kind of inconsistent, but not too terrible. All right, let's see if we can get back to 100 frames per second here again by using FSR. So just FSR Quality, rest of the settings still exactly the same, and we didn't go much. So it seems like Ultra, or the High preset, puts additional load on the CPU, and this is pretty much where we were previously as well, right? In the 60s, 70s, even if we do use more aggressive upscaling, we're not going to see a higher frame rate. So for some reason, I do think this is a lower than with the RX 4070 for some reason. Not entirely. I really can't remember. I finished recording that video at 3 a.m. So my brain is a little bit cloudy. I'll just put up like a text on the screen to say what the RX 4070 frame rate was with these kind of settings. But not the worst experience. If you're aiming for 4K 60, you can actually do it at native on the high preset. So, but if you just want to ensure that you do get 60, use FSR set to quality. Like, you don't lose a lot of visual fidelity, especially at 4K. So I'm just going to bump this up to FSR Performance just to show you that we won't gain any performance here. Right, so FSR Performance, exactly the same settings here. Let's go back into the game, and 77 frames per second. So our GPU power is quite low, 131. So like that's about half. Even though our GPU usage is sitting at 80%, that's not 80% of the power usage. I mean, I'm not complaining. This the fan speed is sitting at 666 RPM. It's going down even. I must say that this XFX 319 quick whatever GPU, it runs very cool and very quiet. I'm quite impressed. It runs much cooler than both the 4070 and 4070 Ti, despite using about the same power as the 4070 Ti. And the 4070 Ti is also a 3-fan version. This is the 3-fan version, but it runs like 20 degrees cooler at times. So quite impressed there. Anyway, like, once again, not seeing any change whatsoever when we start enabling FSR set to performance here. Our average there is 79, 1% laser sitting at 52, and our 0.1% laser sitting at 37. But the frame time graph did smoothen out a little bit. All right, I'm just going to restart the game and enable ray tracing, and then we'll be right back. Right, so we're back, and at 1080p TAA high settings, and ray tracing is now enabled. You only have on or off, and it only uses ray traced reflections in this game from what I can see in the options. So let's go ahead and start our benchmark counter here, and once again CPU bound. Like, not entirely unexpected, because this is exactly what happened with RX 4070 as well. The stuttering is much worse than previously. Maybe it'll even out a little bit as we play along. This game actually optimizes shaders every time you go into the game. It's kind of annoying. The first and second time take quite long, but being CPU bound here, once again, like, we are going to be getting around 60 frames per second at all times, right? So our average is 71 frames per second, our 1% laser sitting at 40, and our 0.1% laser sitting at 29. We did see a dip there below 60. What I mean is our maximum would be around this frame rate because we are CPU bound, right? So let's go ahead and just enable FSR. Let's see if it helps, although it probably won't. The same as what we've seen with DLSS. It does not seem to affect the resolution of the rays being traced. So there's no real benefit to enabling FSR here, as our performance probably won't improve at all being CPU bound. So let's... It might have increased 1 or 2, right? But not there we go, dropping into the mid 50s there again. The it looks kind of bad. FSR looks pretty bad. Just look at the reflections and look at the railings. They're even standing still, like they are very, very pixelated and shimmery. FSR definitely not. Look at the car, it looks terrible. FSR definitely not worth it at 1080p, especially in this game. This game's FSR implementation is horrible. It really is. And yeah, so there we go. Around 60. I mean, it's going to go up. We're going to have an average of just above 70 frames per second, pretty much the same as what we had earlier. And just don't use FSR, even if you do use ray tracing at 1080p. All right, let's move on to 1440p. All right, so 1440p on the high preset with TAA being enabled now. So 1440p high TAA ray tracing enabled. And let's see. So finally, we are not CPU bound. We are sitting at 99% GPU usage, crossing the street there, dropping into the mid 40s. Still being CPU bound in that specific area, and the frame time graph is quite inconsistent now. Just to get the GPU usage, the power usage, I mean, it goes into the 250s. As I said, that's pretty much where this GPU runs most of the time, 250 watt. So it was quite funny seeing it running at 130 watt earlier. But still, like this is not the worst experience you'll ever have. Except like in certain areas it'll definitely drop below 60, and when it does, it drops well below 60, and I think FSR might be able to help us with that at least. So let's do FSR, and I'm just going to try the medium preset after this, just see if we actually get a more consistent frame rate. All right, so just FSR quality, exactly the same settings as earlier, and we didn't see a big bump in our performance. And let me just reset the numbers. And so we were basically on the verge of being CPU bound, but you can see as we cross that street there, it drops into the mid 50s. I don't think you should be using ray tracing with this GPU unless you are happy with the frame rate dropping below 60. FSR is like, it just over sharpens everything, and it just makes a lot of the things so shimmery, and I don't know, it's definitely not a good implementation at all. But we are CPU bound with it anyway at these settings, so not going to make a difference at all. What I want to do is I just want to drop this down to medium. I know we are CPU bound, but as I alluded to earlier, there might be some settings that are actually impacting the CPU as well. So we might alleviate some CPU load by going down to medium. So I'm just going to use exactly the same settings are just FSR quality, and I'm just dropping this down to medium, right? So I do think that like there's not much you can change here. So not sure which of these settings actually impacts CPU performance, because everything here just shows impacting GPU VRAM. Like I don't know. We do need some more advanced options here. Right, so wrong buttons, and there we go. So there we go. Dropping down to the medium preset, we are still CPU bound, but we do gain a little bit of we do get a little bit of a boost in the frame rate. Not at all times though, because we still saw a dip into the low 50s or mid 50s there. Heavily CPU bound GPU usage or GPU power sitting at 140 watts. Like that's basically half of your GPU going to waste. At least it'll be cool if you live in the northern hemisphere. At the moment, this is not what you want. Me living in the southern hemisphere, it's exactly what I want. 130 watts GPU. But anyway, like getting back here at this time, the performance seems to fluctuate quite a bit. We were seeing it around 77. Now we're back at 66. I don't know. Like, game is weird. Definitely some technical issues. All right, so average there was 68 frames per second, or 1% lows are sitting at 40, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 33. So let's move on to 4K, and then I'll be done with this video. I can take a little bit of a rest, because this game is quite annoying with all its technical issues. Right, so for the 4K, we're just going to use the medium preset here, and still ray tracing with the TAA enabled. Let me just go ahead and save that. So the RX 4070 was doing around 30 frames per second here, and we are doing, well, just above 30 frames per second. So pretty much the same. And that's actually one thing with regards to the Radeon GPUs when it comes to ray tracing, is that if there are very few ray traced options being enabled, like in this case only a single ray traced option, ray traced reflections, the Radeon GPUs aren't that far behind NVIDIA GPUs. Now, the more ray tracing options you start enabling, the further it starts falling behind. Even though reflections is actually one of the reflections is or reflections are. I mean, it's a single setting, so it's probably reflections is probably one of the more demanding ray trace settings there is. It does seem to do okay in this game with the Radeon GPUs, but we are fully GPU bound here. You can see our GPU power is sitting at 250 watt and the usage is sitting at 98%, but our average frame rate is 37, our 1% lows are sitting at 28, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 23. So let's see if we can breach that 60 frames per second mark, like what kind of settings we need to use or what kind of FSR presets. So let's just start off on the quality preset here. I just want to see what our frame rate is. So 60 to 63. I'm going to do one more aggressive upscaling setting just to see if we gain a little bit of performance, just to make sure that we stay above 60 frames per second. Yeah, so we'll use FSR balanced, and I think we should be able to stay above 60. I mean, depending on our CPU. Yeah, so let's go ahead and do that, and we're back into the 70s in this specific area. And FSR balanced, or like balanced upscaling, is generally quite okay. Why can I not swing? There we go. Generally okay at 4K, except like just look at the reflections there in the window there, or whatever that's supposed to be. I'm laughing. Like I've got no opinions on this game at all so far, except the technical aspect of it, and technically it's lacking quite a lot. What I was going to say is that FSR upscaling up until performance at 4K is still usable most of the time. FSR though in this game does seem to suck. Like it's really far behind DLSS. If you want to do your own comparisons, the 4070 video is up. I'll link it to this video. All right, there we go. Our average there's a nice 69, and our 1% lows are sitting at 44, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 33. So not the worst experience. I do think that if you do want like a higher frame rate or close to a higher refresh rate experience, just disable ray tracing and enjoy the game. It's only ray traced reflections. You probably won't miss it too much if you just run around shooting bad guys and stuff. And but that's just my opinion. All right, that's going to be the end of this video. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and as always, we hope to see you in the next one.